picture there of St. Mary Major Basilica. This is where the interment of Pope Francis will be. I want us to move away from this location, if we can, for just a moment, and move to where my colleague Linda Mnisi is. We will keep live picture on this because these are the final images, I believe, that we'll be seeing as that burial happens in a private way. Linda, we're coming to the end of a really historic chapter. What is it like where you are?
Well, I'm still at the St. Peter's Square, Iman, where scores of people are still lining up the streets. They're watching those particular proceedings from TV screens because, as you can imagine, the streets are packed. There was a guard of honor formed in a number of streets leading to the Basilica where the Pope is going to be laid to rest. I'm joined now by a South African who lives full-time here in Rome, Father Petro, Matlala. Thank you so much for your time. I want you to explain to us and help us understand the kind of, or the level of influence that the Pope has on people here in Rome, be it Catholics or non-Catholics, because it's one thing to see him on TV, right? And it's another to experience and see him here daily. What was that like?
Good afternoon to the viewers back at home. Firstly, I must say I'm also here I arrived a few months, but the stories I've heard of the Pope is that, especially during this time of Easter, which is a tradition within the Catholic Church, that it is an opportunity for houses to be blessed. So he would go and bless houses. During the time of Holy Thursday, as we are entering into a very sacred time of the Church, he would go to the prison and wash the feet of prisoners and also try and reach out to them. I'm not sure if you have noticed some tents around the Vatican, but he had also allowed people who do not have homes to come pitch tent around the Vatican Square, and in the morning they would receive breakfast and a shower, and that ministering continued within the Vatican. And so he's also a person, especially during Chrism Mass. This is a Mass where priests renew their promises. He would always remind the priests who work in the Diocese of Rome, to be true pastors, to reach out to people and not just serve behind we call it an ambo, but for people to understand a pulpit, just preaching, but also, go make the message alive for the people. And so he has really been very influential as a Pope who did not stay behind the walls, if you could put it like that, but a Pope who would want to be with the people. Maybe it's unfortunate, I never met him in a private audience, but I have attended masses that he celebrated during his time still alive, and I must say that his presence, his aura in himself, it was quite a holy one, and you could actually experience that this man is prayerful, but at the same time, this man wants to be with the people, maybe because of the figure he is, the security protocol, then sometimes he can't stay long. But I must say that he was one person who maybe reminded us as a church that we should really be with the people, not away from the people.
There's been a lot of conversations about his papacy, right? And what really he stood for. And, some people are reflecting on how within the church, he faced a lot of criticism for the manner in which he chose to run the church. Talk to me about the sentiments here on the ground. As you interact with people, you live here, so I'm sure when you go buy bread, you hear what people are saying. Do people here, ordinary people, could they identify with what he stood for and what he aimed to achieve on a daily basis?
Firstly, Pope Francis, after he was then elected the new Pope, he chose the name Francis. Now, Francis is a very renowned Italian saint. And with that already, the people could identify, because Francis is not someone outside of Italy, for example. So his style of ministering was not a style which would have shocked them, given the fact of who the person Francis was. You know, Francis was not a person who even looked, or who was ambitious, one could put it. Even when he ministered, people even wanted to push him to say, become a priest. And Francis denied even to become a priest, showing that you don't need to be up there to be a servant. And I think this is what Francis was trying to really remind us as the church globally, to say, wherever you are able to minister. And so I think that spirit around Rome, around Italy, I wouldn't see it as criticism, because they understand men like Francis who really left everything, riches, and wanted to be simple, show truly what it means to be humble. And I must say, one of the most powerful thing that maybe we needed to be reminded of is the whole question of, and Jesus asks that question, who is my neighbor? And I think the story in the Bible speaks about a priest passing a person who's hurt. And the Pharisee, who's a high official and a high religious person who's respected, also passing this sick person. And the interesting thing that this person who is hurt is a Jew, and he's then held by a Samaritan, which back in the days, Jews and Samaritans were people who could not really come together. And therefore, you realize that they could not come together because of how they saw themselves in terms of maybe tribe. And this is what Pope Francis tried to show us, that let's look beyond tribe, let's look beyond race, let's look beyond education, less educated, let's look beyond all those things and answer that every person is my neighbor. And I think this is quite powerful in a sense that is why he propagated so much for refugees, those who are marginalized. And so this is a person who really looked to those who somehow society was slowly starting to forget them and somehow slowly discarding them, you know. And so Francis was simply doing that. And even the old Francis, that's what he did. He went to the poor. A beautiful story is told about Francis, that there was a man who had leprosy. And you know, lepers in the olden days were people who could not be even allowed in the community because the skin disease was contagious. But Francis went and ministered to that leper. And so this is what really Pope Francis tried to do. It's just something which was happening in the church, but I think he just rekindled it, and now it has caught its fire.
I want us to talk about what the future looks like. You're a young priest, and you're going to grow, obviously, in the church. One day, probably going to be a leader, could be the next pope. But from this point onwards, what does the future in the church look like? Because, I mean, you enter these spaces, but also there's fears that all the work that he has done will be undone. The gains that have been made could be reversed by a pope who may come in and may not be as liberal as he's thought to be.
I think firstly what we must understand is that within the church, we believe that God, in his goodness, gives each person a gift. Now, all these gifts are given to individuals, but these gifts serve the same God, although they are different gifts. And so we have seen through centuries in terms of the church, many popes came in and brought some form of reformation. But that reformation was not to undo what the one before did. And even you see a form of continuity in terms of that reality. And I think now, Francis also, or Pope Francis rather, was given this charism to be close to the people. And I don't think people now, if the new Pope is not close to the people, it should not be like he's undoing what he did. No, because the new Pope could be gifted differently, and he might be bringing other things that continue to build on what Francis could not reach, because he did not do everything. He could do whatever, or he could stretch himself as far as he could. And then we wait for our next man to build on top of that. So I think what is very important is the fact that we need to acknowledge that leadership also comes with a particular gift. And that's what we acknowledge in the church, that these gifts are given to serve one God. And therefore, this is what we really somehow have faith in, that the next man will continue in his gifts to help us reach God and become closer to God.
I want to ask you about, whether or not, I know this is a period of mourning, but is there an excitement, a level of excitement about the next step, the conclave? Some people will be witnessing it or seeing it for the first time, while others obviously have seen popes come and go. But amongst your peers, what is the conversation like there? Is there excitement about what's to come?
Maybe firstly we need to understand that today's Mass, or the funeral service, starts the period of mourning. And this period will take 9 days. Now, this period is also an opportunity for for the church to pray and meditate and rely very much on the Holy Spirit. Now, of course, this now slowly also builds towards the conclave. Now, the exciting part for us is the fact that we are seeing, especially even myself and some of my friends, that we are seeing a church that somehow mirrors itself to the first church. And what do I mean by that? When we read in the Acts of the Apostles, we hear that Jesus ascended into heaven. And when he ascended into heaven, when he left the disciples, they were unsure, they were uncertain, they were somehow feeling that maybe it's over. And fear was with them. But when we hear what they did, that they remained in prayer, and after 9 days, actually, the Spirit came and it gave them courage, and they were bold to stand up for what is right, to preach without fear. And so this is also exciting in a sense that we are slowly also experiencing what had happened many, many years, and it's happening in our time, that now, as we are entering into this moment of mourning, but we are also anticipating that the Spirit will truly come. And when it comes, maybe because some of us are here in Rome, we might experience it. And this experience also will help us to actually also see the fact that, the man who enters is not a man who was just handpicked, was not a man who was diplomatically picked, but this is a man who was picked through the Holy Spirit, the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And I think this is, for me, is the most exciting thing, the fact that one is close to everything, given the fact that it is the Spirit that leads the church during this time.
Father Petro, I want to thank you so much for your time and availing yourself to speak to us. Father Petro, there he is, a priest, a South African residing here in Rome, giving us sort of the lay of the land, Iman, and what people are saying, what young people like himself are saying and anticipating for the next coming days, really, as, like he said, the mourning period starts, and which is essentially a build-up to the conclave. So at this particular moment, Iman, as the proceedings at the St. Mary Major conclude, there is, of course, that sense of the beginning of the mourning period, which will be followed by that conclave. So still quite a lot is going to happen. It is an end of an era, but a beginning of another one, because of course they'll have to go back to the drawing board and choose a leader who will now take the church forward. Iman?
Linda, what an incredible drawing board it is, because it happens in the Sistine Chapel. This magnificent piece of art that was done by Michelangelo, which took him about 4 years to accomplish. But before I let you go and let you continue to find us great interviews, I want to ask how you're feeling, Linda, because you did that incredible package on the Pope, on the announcement of his passing. You are literally in a place where so many people have gathered for so many reasons, but mostly to pay their final respects to this incredible, now historical figure. What does it feel like for you being so close to St. Peter's Square, interacting with all of these people and just witnessing, really, their journey in this moment?
Well, Iman, obviously it's surreal, and it's very difficult that you're asking me this question. But, I mean, obviously it's something that I've watched on television before, but now experiencing it firsthand is really something else, Iman. And I specifically asked Father Petro that question to say, when you see the Pope on television, it's different to when you experience, him here right in front of your eyes. And I think that's because of the kind of impression that I got, so the kind of feeling that I got when I arrived here, seeing the level of seriousness and the attention to detail that is put into this historic event, but also how everybody is so invested, be it Catholics or non-Catholic, everybody's just so invested in ensuring that this process is, of course, meticulously handled. So all of it, looking at it from where I'm standing, really was something to marvel at, and particularly as a young reporter, because there are a number of journalists that have come from all corners, really, of the world, and listening to their crossings and what they are telling viewers across the world, particularly about his message for peace, in Palestine, for example, and a number of other countries that he has also visited. You'd recall the very first time he came to Africa was in 2015, and he went directly to a war-stricken country to try and preach the message of peace. We saw his visit in the DRC, in South Sudan, and again preaching peace. So all of those things and all those messages really, getting to hear them from other people and not something that we read about or something that we watch on television was quite an experience, Iman.
Well, Linda, don't feel bad. I know you're used to asking the questions around here, and as journalists, we don't like to have the questions asked of us and to share our own experiences, but you are in a remarkable place at a remarkable point of history. You're extremely lucky to be there and to be also a part of this moment. So I'll allow you to continue and do that, interact with more people and bring us the stories of those who've traveled, in many cases, from far and wide to witness the Pope's final send-off. Our man in the Vatican, Linda Mnisi. Again, it is a wonderful and incredible assignment to be involved in. And Linda there becoming part of somebody's photo album. There was someone taking a photo of Linda. He didn't even know. But what's so interesting about Linda's last guest, Father Mduduzi, is that he was interviewing, Father Lawrence, which...
All of them are fine.
All of them are fine. Yeah. All apply. Father Petro, you guys studied together. He was your classmate?
Yes, we started together. Literally met on the first day at the seminary. We were both, he was from Pretoria and I was, of course, from Johannesburg. And we went to the pre-seminary, orientation seminary in Oakford, KwaZulu-Natal together. So when I saw him, I thought, where did they find him?
Out of all the people in the entire world, to find somebody that you know. Coming back to the ceremony and the moment between Easter Monday and now, it's hard to believe that it's only been 5 days ago. And you were commenting in the break that someone would have gone to Mass and we would have had a Pope, and then 5 days later, what happens?
He's gone and buried, not just dead, but also buried, you know. And I allow myself to think about people who are sort of in the rural areas. You know, they went to church last week, Sunday. They've gone about their business the entire week. They're probably going to come to church on Sunday, and all of a sudden the name Francis is not there, you know. But also, it speaks to the fact that there is no deification of popes. There's a lot of respect and reverence for them, but they're not exempted from the human condition. And so what happens when you die, we must bury you, you know, and life must go on. I think what is important is that the church